Hey guys, so obviously a fantastic result in the end for United versus West Ham. Going into half-time at 1-0 down, it was a terrible, terrible performance, not just in the first half, but maybe the first 10 minutes of the second half as well. And you got to give credit to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. At half-time, his substitutions did change the game in more ways than one. Now, if obviously this is a tactical analysis, we'll break down what happened, not just second half, but also the first half, because when you put things in context, it's important to take a step back and have a look at why we weren't able to do well in the first half, and why we needed such a big turnaround in the second half to come away with the result we got. Looking at the expected goals, which is sometimes a useful measure in situations like this, West Ham actually outscored United on expected goals with 2.79 to our 1.3. Now, that says a lot about the sort of chances they missed, the great positions they got themselves into, and says a lot also about the way United played. We weren't able to create that many clear-cut chances in front of goal, and the goals we did score were fantastic bits of individual quality, rather than the team working well as a cohesive unit and getting the ball into nice positions in front of the opposition goal to slot the ball in simply. So it does show that United, even though we had some fantastic, brilliant goals from Pogba and Mason Greenwood in particular, and a great pass from Mata for Rashford's goal, it does show that United overall as a team didn't do so well, but the individual quality saw us through. Now, if we look at the first half of the game then, so where things went wrong, first half we were absolutely woeful. Defensively, West Ham was set up really, really well in a 5-4-1 formation. They had us everything we did under control in that first half. And the main reasons were that we were really, really struggling to move the ball forwards. Now, part of that obviously is down to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's coaching and the rest of the coaching team in terms of they haven't improved our ball progression problems that we've had for a long, long time now. Not just this season, but last season too. And it's something that's really disappointing to see. But today, the problems ran deeper than that. It wasn't just the coaching of the players. It was also the players individually on the pitch. And what I mean by that is, if you want to create space to try and receive the ball, to get on the half turn and be able to look forward and play the ball forward to the players in front of you, you need to generate that little bit of space for yourself. Now, you've got to give West Ham and David Moyes a bit of credit here because defensively they were fantastic. But what we saw far too often from United in the first half was when our players, particularly our forwards, when they peeled off the defence, dropped a little bit deeper, every time they would get tracked all the way aggressively by the West Ham players. And we didn't have the quality to either create a bit of individual space by beating that man, or to create a bit of individual space and dropping off, or anything really. Turning the man, a little bit of skill, holding him and rolling him. We didn't have any real ability to create space, and that made it really difficult for the players behind McTominay, Pogba, and the back four to pass the ball forwards and for it then to stick. So what we see from United quite often in build-up, and it's one of the only things you could say even comes close to a pattern of play, is getting that ball forwards to a winger who lays it off into a central player, or into Bruno who lays it off to the winger out wide. And obviously in this game that didn't happen, because we weren't able to create the space for those players peeling off the front to receive that pass, because they were tracked so well by the West Ham players. So as I alluded to, it's one of the basic things in football, really, creating individual space in 1v1 battles. And when you're a pro footballer, you would have been doing this for years. Since you're in the youth team, right the way up from sort of age 6, the focus is always on winning your individual battle, creating a little bit of space for yourself to receive the ball so that you can do what you do best. So in Martial's case, that's turning, dribbling and running. But he needs to get a little bit of space to receive that ball first. And in the first half, we didn't see it because the movement wasn't clever. The passing wasn't sharp. So what I wanted to see, and what we need to see more of in future games, are players doing things individually to affect their 1v1 with their nearest opponent. Because it's not just about the overall sort of full-size tactical picture 11v11. If you can get a 1v1 bit of space, that can make all the difference in games like this, especially against a low block. So what we need to see is if Martial wants to go in behind here for maybe a pass from Paul Pogba, rather than just running in behind, which is going to be very easily tracked by both the right wing-back and the right centre-back, before he does that, why not throw the defender off guard? Either make an early move, check back and go again, or offer short. Pretend you're obviously don't do it at half pace, go full pace, offer short. Defender will probably follow you because we saw West Ham were tracking really aggressively. The defender would have followed him, and then when he runs in behind, he's quicker than the defender who's got to turn as well, and he's got so much space all of a sudden. So it's just little bits of intelligence, little basic bits of movement that would have made so much difference in that first half especially. Now, in terms of the personnel in that first half, obviously Donny van de Beek was, he was ineffective at best in that first half, to be honest. He wasn't able to sort of turn Declan Rice, create any space for himself to play the ball, partly down to Cavani and the forwards in front of him not stretching the game, but also because he didn't have his best game, and that happens from time to time for individual players. You could say the same about a few other players in that first half, but what we needed to see from Van de Beek and McTominay is, even if you can't get the ball, can't have the space, you can't generate your own space, just get a little bit higher, especially when you're playing with someone like Paul Pogba. Make sure that the midfield are worrying about what's behind them, rather than just being able to let United play in front of us and just press us really easily. So if they'd stood a bit higher, what it does is it creates a little bit of space for Paul Pogba then, who's got a little bit of time to pick out a nice pass. So McTominay and Van de Beek in this game maybe weren't capable of doing that, but Pogba certainly was. So they've got to maybe adapt their own game, compromise their own game a little bit to get the best out of Paul Pogba and to get the best, therefore, out of the team. Now, obviously, there is a risk with that in that Pogba is not the best against the press. If he loses that ball, we're exposed a little bit. So you've got to bear in mind that as well. But there is the back four behind him to cover. So for me, I think it would have been nice to see in the first half, tactically as well, McTominay and Van de Beek just getting beyond the opposition midfield. Even if there's not space, even if they're not likely to be able to get the ball, be disciplined and hold your position there rather than just dropping deep constantly, because it does make a difference for players like Pogba, who will then have slightly more time to pick out a really accurate, precise pass to the forward players in front of them. Now, that's enough on the first half. Obviously, it was woeful, but Ole Gunnar Solskjaer at half-time made some changes. So, obviously, Edinson Cavani came off. Apparently, that's due to injury, which doesn't bode too well for our game in midweek against Leipzig. Anthony Martial also came off, and on came Marcus Rashford and Bruno Fernandes. It was Anthony Martial through the middle, I believe, at the start of the second half. But yeah, so it was Van de Beek that came off, sorry. My bad. And then Mata came on towards the end. Can't remember the changes. Someone remind me in the comments what the changes were. But yeah, second half, what was so important is that rather than having the lack of movement we saw first half, we had players running forward. We had Marcus Rashford, Fernandes, constantly looking to go in behind the defence. And not just that, Fernandes has such gravity now because teams really fear Bruno Fernandes. Rather than just having Declan Rice on him like it was for Van de Beek, Souček had to keep an eye on Fernandes as well. And that gave a little bit more room, a bit more time for Pogba to get forward, influence the game a little bit more time for the forwards to drop deep, and a bit more space for them in the centre of the park. So what it did, rather than just maybe saying Bruno Fernandes is better at the job that Van de Beek was doing, it's not just that. It's his supreme quality and the fear he puts into the opposition that actually changed the way West Ham played. So in the first half, where West Ham were really, really compact, they were aggressive at tracking every run. They couldn't afford to do that in the second half, because if let's say a defender comes out to try and track Fernandes when he's moving into the space beyond the midfield, they've got to be worried about Rashford, Martial, Mason Greenwood running in behind them instead. So all of a sudden, the whole complexion of the game shifts because you're asking more questions. You're forcing decisions to be made by the West Ham defence. So for me, that was where Solskjaer obviously got things very right. But in that second half, it was staggering to see just how big a difference there was. And now look, we didn't create that many clear-cut chances in the second half. And the goals we did score were from incredible quality, from Paul Pogba and Mason Greenwood in particular. But also then, later on, from Juan Mata for that brilliant ball towards Marcus Rashford, who was running in behind again. Now what happened, as soon as United got that first goal, the game opened up. And that was fantastic for United. West Ham had to come out. They couldn't just sit in their defensive shape anymore. They had to come out, and they did. And as soon as that happens, they move higher up the pitch, and there's a lot more space in behind for Marcus Rashford in particular to attack. And as we saw, all it took was the passing to be much more precise, much sharper, much better from the midfield players in particular, and the runs from Rashford and Fernandes in behind. And all of a sudden, we look a completely different team. So it's important to think sort of why this has happened and obviously give credit to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer for the changes he made, but also to bear in mind that football is a lot more complicated than just saying X player or Y players on, because it's about the challenges they provide to the opposition as well as their individual quality. So obviously there in the second half, fantastic from Solskjaer, fantastic from United, and we came away with a brilliant victory. So I'm very pleased with the way it turned out. Obviously first half we weren't good enough, and there are clear things we need to work on. Ball progression, players winning their individual battles, creating space for themselves 1v1, which is going to be so important, especially against Leipzig on Tuesday. But if we can take this momentum from that second half, just the aspects of the performance that were good, into Leipzig, the game against Leipzig, we should qualify from this Champions League group. So, look, fantastic result in the end, even if it's not the best performance. Hope you've enjoyed the analysis, and we'll see you again on Tuesday very soon. So thanks again for watching, hope you've enjoyed it, and see you very soon.